Okay, let's get ready to read Dante's Divine Comedy, which was written between 1307 and 1321. Many consider this Divine Comedy the supreme literary work, not only of medieval Christendom, but of the whole Christian faith in general, rivaled only by Milton's Paradise Lost. He gives a very compelling vision of Christian love. That's the theme of the whole thing, is love, divine love. It is a massive work with a very intricate structure that is really quite impressive. It's got 15,000 lines almost and exactly 100 cantos. Canto means song in English. So each chapter is called a canto. The 100 cantos are divided into 3 equal sections. So each section has 33, and then there's one at the beginning. So that's 100 exactly. So 33 in the Inferno, which is the first part, 33 in Purgatorio, and 33 cantos in Paradiso. And these divisions correspond to Dante's conception of the states of souls, not only after death, but in life as well. And it's a sacred poem where he's stirring drama of the human soul and discovering the life of faith in the faithless world. Dante uses himself as a fictional character. So we have Dante the poet, who is the real man who lived from 1265 to 1321 and had a real life and real conflicts and problems and troubles, and he wrote this. And then within the work, we have Dante the Pilgrim, which is sort of a fictionalized character. Dante the poet relates what happens to Dante the Pilgrim when he talks about, in the opening canto, midway in the journey of our life, I awoke and found myself in the dark wood of error. So he had somehow left the straight way, and he's facing death. So as we're reading, we have to ask ourselves, who's doing what? Is this Dante the poet or Dante the pilgrim? So we have to keep that straight. And the way to do that, we're going to make a timeline so we can understand when Dante the poet was born and experiencing things and writing things. And then Dante the Pilgrim takes place kind of in the middle of Dante's life timeline, but Dante's looking backward. So it's a little confusing, but we'll make a timeline, and that is going to help us keep us straight. So he's in Canto 1, he has left the straight path, he's in the dark wood of error, and he's facing death, essentially, in the form of 3 beasts, which symbolize specific sort of sins that are going to devour him and cause him to die and go to hell. So this is when someone of great importance in his life, Beatrice, comes from the dead to intervene and help him out. Beatrice is in heaven with Mary, the Queen of Heaven, and she sees Dante's problem, so she sends someone to save him from this dark wood, and the person that she sends is the poet Virgil. Virgil is going to be Dante's guide to get out of the wood of error and onto the true path. But the way to get out of error is to take this giant journey through all of hell and all of its levels, then through purgatory, where hell is where you're an unrepentant sinner. So we're going to explore different kinds of sins, how they work on you, how they twist and wreck you. And these people are unrepentant. And then after you come out of hell, you get it to purgatory, which is like this in-between place where you have repented of the sin, but you have to purge it from you. So you have to work your way out from under these sins, purge them. And then finally, heaven or paradise. So those are the three realms of the afterlife that reveal God's justice and his love, according to Dante, according to Catholic tradition. So as Dante travels, he glimpses things that would be unknown to people in this life. And he relates the story of his journey. Sometimes it's perilous, sometimes it's pleasurable. And he relates the stories of the souls that he encounters in each realms. What he sees, how horrible it is in hell, how they're suffering, how their punishment is going, and what interactions he has. But then when he gets to Paradiso, there's a blinding light of heaven. He gains wisdom. And after all this, he's finally prepared to resume his his earthly trials. And the poem ends with one of the most memorable images in Western art, when Dante beholds the beatific vision, which is coming face to face with God. So let's talk a little bit about his life. Dante was born in Florence. That's in Italy in the Middle Ages, one of the city-states that is torn by political and religious factions. So really all of medieval Europe is going through this period where princes and kings and emperors are fighting for power. They even fight against the papacy in Rome. So again, the Pope is a religious figure, but he's also a political power, like a king, and they're all struggling back and forth between who should be in charge, and they're not all necessarily doing the right thing. Florence is a gorgeous, gorgeous city. I would love to go there. In Dante's time, there was the baptistry of Florence, and he was probably baptized there. And it is this grand, amazing piece of architecture full of these really cool mosaics. I'm probably going to post a video about that so you can have a look at it. And then a few hundred years after Dante, Florence is going to be leading the Renaissance, leading the art of the Renaissance. So that's where Michelangelo's going to be, and there's going to be an amazing cathedral with a dome built that will be world famous. All that's still there. There's going to be all this great art in Florence. So most of that happens after Dante, but the one thing that was definitely there when he was there was the baptistry. And Florence gets its power and wealth from the same banking families that are trading all over Europe and the East. Venice is also a power, and Rome, of course, is a power where the papal seat is, but Florence is right up there with power and with political intrigue. So he's going to get involved in some of that political intrigue. So I think it was 1295 or 13 to 1302, around there. Dante finds himself on the losing political side. And what that means for him is he gets exiled from Florence. And he's condemned to death. So he can never go back to Florence or they will kill him. His political enemies will kill him. And he indeed never saw Florence again in his life. And he just sort of wandered from patron to patron in Italy. And even though he became famous for his literary accomplishments, he never did make it back to Florence, and he always missed it and was sad about it. The comedy alludes to these events frequently. And he's going to meet people in the various levels of the afterlife that are going to sort of speak to the politics of the day, the politics of the previous generation, and just his situation as an exile. So we'll be on the lookout for that. Okay, something else from his earlier life. The two figures already mentioned, Beatrice, a young woman of Florence, and Virgil, the famous Roman poet, who lived just before the birth of Christ and wrote the epic poem, the Aeneid. So if you did any of the Virgil extra credit or the Aeneid extra credit, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it will help you when you read Inferno to know who Virgil is and what is happening in the Aeneid. So let's talk a little bit more about the person who is going to guide Dante to see divine love, to see the beatific vision, the face of God. There's a woman named Beatrice. Dante first writes about his love for Beatrice in the Vita Nuova, the New Life, which is a small volume of 31 love poems interspersed with his commentary. He wrote that when he was about 30, and he's recalling his first sight of Beatrice when he was only a boy of 9 and she was a girl of 8. And he has this vision of her, and this experience stirs within him this enduring love, and it forever changes his life. And this impression of her was deepened when 9 years later, she met him again and greeted him on the street. And from that point onward, he says he placed himself in the service of love as he sought to understand her extraordinary impact. When she turned on him her beautiful eyes and remarkable smile, he was moved to a nobility that he had not felt before. So they were not going to be lovers or like boyfriend or girlfriend or anything like that. She was married to someone else. But he came to regard her as a manifestation of God's grace and love on earth. And her name, Beatrice, is the same, means blessed, one who blesses. So it's the same as the Beatitudes in the Bible, or when someone becomes a saint, they are beatified. So she is one who blesses. After she dies really young. She's only like 24. He concluded from a marvelous vision, so he claims to have had a vision, that he should compose no more until he could write of her what had never been written of any woman. And that composition turned out to be the Divine Comedy. The other guide that he's got is Virgil, that we mentioned before, and Virgil's epic story of Rome's origins. Medieval theologians regarded the Aeneid as a masterpiece, and they used the hero Aeneas and the events of that poem to shed light on the Bible. Like all other poetry, however, Virgil's great work was held to be fictional and thus greatly inferior to Scripture. Dante would have known Scripture inside and out, but he also would have known the Aeneid inside and out. But anyway, Dante chooses Virgil as his guide to the threshold of heaven in the comedy and describes him as journeying in darkness, but lighting the way for those who follow. Because Virgil's not a Christian, so he can't be fully in the light and he can't fully make it all the way to heaven, but he can come to the dark wood of error. He can take him through hell and purgatory. So anyway, in doing it this way, he's breaking down the presiding scriptural elitism and reclaiming non-Christian achievements as aspects of God's truth worthy of study. So he's saying all truth is God's truth, even the truth that's in these pagan poets that came along before Christ. Even though Virgil didn't know Christ, couldn't possibly become a Christian because of his place in time, he still got the truth in his poem because all truth is from God. That's what Dante is, sort of the idea he's working with here. So in this sense, Dante is bridging the medieval and the Renaissance worlds by gathering up the former and stepping prophetically into the latter. The central roles of Beatrice and Virgil reflect Dante's sacramental view of the world and of history. He sees God as revealing his abundant love everywhere and at all times in his creation. Nothing is lost. No life lived or action performed in futility, because both the greatest good and the greatest evil show forth divine truth and advance his plan. The Divine Comedy exemplifies the meaning of the word Catholic, which means inclusive and redemptive, meaning like encompassing the whole world. So it is a Catholic poem. The single unified theme of the entire comedy is love. God is love, and every aspect of his creation, especially humanity, is infused with this divine attribute. According to Dante, people can't live without loving. Because they have free will, however, they may choose to love the wrong object or love the right object too much or too little. So that might seem confusing because what we're going to encounter in hell is pretty awful. How can that be about love? But let's just stay tuned. In the very middle of his poem, in the Purgatorio on Mount Purgatory, in purgatory, that word is to purge. So that's where people are going to be purging the sin that they are repenting of before they can enter into heaven. They have to get rid of it. So anyway, on Mount Purgatory, Dante has Virgil speak at length on the truth of life's drama, that arduous search to love the right things in the right way. Thus, Dante the Pilgrim journeys toward a full understanding of the love in which God intends for him to live and find joy, not only in this life, but in the next. And he must come to see his love for Beatrice as merely an imperfect reflection of the abundant love to be found in the blessedness of God's will. Each main section of the poem portrays a different stage of this human understanding of God's love. The Inferno reveals these horrid consequences of love perverted or defective. The Purgatory depicts flawed souls seeking perfection. And then the Paradiso shows the absolute happiness of perfect love achieved. And as Dante moves through the three realms, observing, acting, suffering, and learning, the drama of his own salvation unfolds. Because he is alive, he is an alien in this strange landscape, the afterlife, but he steadily gains the needed maturity in love to return to the fallen world. Remember, he was in the dark wood of error. He'd lost the way. So all this learning is to help him when he gets out of this underworld, world of the dead, and gets back to earth. He's now going to be able to escape the dark wood of error because of all the lessons he's learned. Okay, so first section, Inferno, which is primarily what we will be dealing with. Virgil first leads a terrified Dante into hell. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. These are the words written over the gates of hell. Virgil tries to relieve Dante's fears with the news that Beatrice herself, who is a link in the chain of blessed ladies, beginning with the Virgin Mary, they are the ones that have summoned Virgil to be Dante's guide. So that's supposed to comfort him. So Dante sees that heaven itself is bending to his distress and calling on him, an ordinary person, to become a hero. Dante learns that in hell he will see the woeful people who have lost the good of intellect. These souls of the damned reside within the Inferno's 10 levels that lead downward in ever-tightening circles to Satan. Satan is fixed in ice at the center of the earth. Each level is a circle. So if you've ever heard of somebody talk about, I'm trapped in the third circle of hell, that is a reference, an allusion to Dante. After observing this sad mystery in the first circle of those seemingly innocent, the unbaptized infants and virtuous pagans who sought but missed the good, Dante witnesses on other levels souls twisted by incontinence, violence, and fraud during their earthly lives. It's terrifying. It's a grotesque spectacle. It's punctuated by the stories of people from the past and present. After going past Satan, the two travelers climb upward and finally emerge to see again the stars. So Satan is the lowest level of hell. It's the coldest level of hell because it's the farthest from God's love. And it is the sin that is Dante has deemed as the very worst sin. So each level of hell, as you descend farther down, the sin gets worse and worse, and the punishment worse and worse, and the soul's more and more twisted. And remember, all the souls in hell are unrepentant. So sometimes Dante is going to listen to their stories and feel kind of sorry for them, Dante the Pilgrim, but that is his mistake, because these people are unrepentant. They aren't sorry. They don't see how they are wrong. They're literally saying, I'm right and God's wrong, and they're reaping the consequences of that. And the consequences are pretty awful. Okay, next is Purgatorio. Once out of hell, Dante ascends Mount Purgatory, and that's where the souls are saved but not yet pure enough to enter paradise. Here, the pilgrim must actively purge his own sins as he mounts the 7 terraces. So again, we have levels. This time, though, the levels are going up. And each prescribes a different method of cleansing. In this journey up the mountain, he continues to mature in God's love, becoming aware that Beatrice herself awaits him at the peak. Once there, he discovers the marvelous Garden of Eden, inaccessible on earth to mortals after the fall, but here, the entrance to heaven for the redeemed. Contrary to what he expects, Dante is really anguished when he learns that Virgil's going to leave. He loves Virgil and admires Virgil. They are kindred spirits, and, Virgil's a poet, Dante's a poet, and he just has a lot of admiration for Virgil. But then, so he's upset about Virgil leaving, and he's upset because Beatrice gives this stern rebuke because he is forsaken her after her death. But anyway, she's going to prepare him to keep going. Purgatory most resembles our earthly existence, whereas the souls in the Inferno are occupied with self-centered and fruitless activity. Those on the mountain move arduously upward toward God through their suffering. The purgatorial virtues abound: forgiveness, humility, generosity, community, all of which flow from an increasing commitment to love. So Dante depicts the joy and suffering of those who struggle to live within God's circle of love. Cantos 16 through 18 contain his great lecture on love and explain Dante's understanding that although life is perilous, people are not only capable of, but ultimately responsible for, the choices that determine their eternal destiny. And the third section is Paradiso. This is the last portion. It's a grand feast of light, song, and movement. It is by far the most detailed, abundant image of heaven ever composed. With Beatrice as his guide and companion, Dante rises through the 10 heavens toward the highest heaven. He's sort of like jumping from star to star, and they're again organized in circles, so to speak. And each level has different inhabitants who witness spectacular expressions of God's glory. These 33 cantos depict the pilgrim's spiritual refinement as he ascends with the specific goal of reaching the unparalleled beatific vision at the poem's conclusion. With every sight he sees and soul he hears, his understanding increases. It's described by Beatrice as a heaven of pure light, a light intellectual and full of love. Here, Dante bends to drink from the river of life, and he witnesses its transformation into the celestial rose, alive with the activity of the saints and the angels, the holy company who abide eternally in God's presence. What Dante writes in Canto 33, when he beholds the beatific vision, is arguably the high point in Christian poetry. Even as he attempts to discern the divine mystery of this vision, he is thrust back to the earth. Now, however, he is in a decisively different state from that in which Virgil first found him, lost in the dark wood of error. Now his desire and will have turned in harmony with the love which turns the sun and the other stars. Let's talk just for a minute about the actual paperback that we're going to be using for our text. It's The Inferno by John Ciardi. And each chapter has like a page of notes in italics that is going to give a lot of the background information that you are going to need to make heads or tails of the poem. So the poem is in translation, and you'll notice that we have sets of 3 lines. So in the Italian, that is called Terza Rima. Dante wrote in Terza Rima. So each set of 3 lines would each rhyme, which is a lot easier to do in the Italian than it is to do in the English. So the English does not quite rhyme, and the wordplay is not quite the same. But still, it's a nice translation, and we're going to go with it. So do not skip over these italics notes, because it's kind of giving you a rundown of what's going to happen. And then you're going to meet characters from Dante's life, or from Dante's history, or perhaps from ancient history. Biblical allusions abound. So there are notes again at the end of the chapter. So don't skip those either. You might want to read each chapter twice if you're confused, and if you have questions, because people are going to be specifically named, and it's not going to make any sense to you if you don't know who these people are, because it's their life story and what they chose to do that you have to understand in order to comprehend the message Dante wants us to get. Okay, one last term or idea in Inferno specifically that I want you to look for is called Contrapasso, or also called the symbolic retribution. And this is the idea that sinners in Inferno are punished in a way that is equal and fitting to their crimes. The punishments are kind of metaphorical, but it's not always obvious. So the punishments are like a symbol of how these sinners twisted themselves in their lifetime by choosing the sin. Or also it could be symbolizing how that specific sin affects other people by this wrongdoing. So it's sort of the ultimate, let the punishment fit the crime. And it's called symbolic retribution or contrapasso. So that is something to look out for as we read.